Looks like we are online. Good evening. I am Andriy Bondarenko and I will host this conversation with the authors of New Jerusalem and as part of the Tête-à-tête program. Let me introduce my interlocutors, Himey and Yarema Malashchuk. Hi everyone. Yarema Malashchuk is like me. Just like me, he is staying at home. Actually, no, I am in Lviv. I am working on a project dedicated to quarantine in the center of urban history. And right now, as opposed to the majority of people staying at home, I am staying at work, which of course makes me happy. But that is probably going to be a question about what are you doing about the quarantine. But let's first talk about the film that is being demonstrated at the festival. Of course, I'm going to say a few words about the festival, some important things, and then we're going to talk about the film. The festival, namely the 17th International Documentary Film Festival, DocuDays online edition, with a theme of growing up. And it's interesting for me how this correlates with the theme of your film. So that is the necessary. That's the information I had to say. And all of our conversations happen at the DocuDays website or on Facebook or on YouTube. But all of the films, on the other hand, are accessible at docuspace.org. The festival has started on April 24th, 2020, and will last until May 3rd. But the films will remain accessible for until May 10th, with the only exception the national competition films will be demonstrated for a certain period of time, which is 24 hours, which means that they will become accessible 2 hours after the conversation with the authors, just like this one, and then it will remain accessible for such films will remain accessible for 24 hours. Uh, Also, the Village series will be streamed April 24th to May 3rd, with one episode available for each day, and it will be accessible 20, during 24 hours on docuspace.org. Additionally, Ukrainian language events are being streamed into Facebook and DocuSpace, and English language streams are available on YouTube. And of course, our viewers are welcome to post their questions in the comments to any of the streams. So, of course, and on May 3rd, we're going to have a viewers vote where you will be able to vote for the films you liked or which ones you didn't like. And so this will be applicable to DocuShort, DocuUkraine, and DocuWorld. And that will be possible through docuspace.org. On May 2nd, we're going to have our last day when we are going to have our award ceremony. We're going to award prizes and announce the results of our votes. So that's it for all of the necessary announcements. And now we can jump right into the conversation. And before I ask my questions, I will start with an introduction, maybe share my impressions, because right now you're in quarantine and you don't get to get out of your home and you don't get to discuss the films you see. So I just have to share. Well, Like I said before, I liked the film and I want to thank you once again for the opportunity to watch it. It's very unconventional. Um, I was thinking about what specifically caught my attention about the film. First, it seemed to be obvious, but then it wasn't. And now I can say that it's light and seemingly simple and even seemingly superficial. It doesn't really delve deep into the human reality of those events that it covers. But that appears to be a part of its mission as a film, to be a light sketch, an easy sketch with these light painting with these light touches. And thanks to this approach, it conveys not as much the reality of certain characters and individuals, but rather create a mood. And your film creates a certain emotional atmosphere that the viewer wants to stay in. And this atmosphere works as a lens that if you get into the state, you can use this state to see the world in a certain way. Because without this lens, you can't see the world in this way. So this is a very fine thing. You can see some finer things that might not be noticeable. So it's difficult for me to reason about things that are so ephemeral. This is a very fine play of the characters. It feels like all of the people portrayed here are seemingly characters. They go somewhere, they carry themselves to some destination, and it's very difficult to perceive. But as we submerge, as we immerse into this emotional state, we start perceiving this intricate emotional state and spiritual state that the people are in. So this thus discovering a certain reality which would before be inaccessible before viewing the film. And it's not just enough to know that there is this sort of it's a holy site and that there are those pilgrimages. You have to really immerse into this. Sorry for maybe I'll interrupt you or maybe even add on to pile on to what you're saying. You you almost cited the you almost quoted the uh, the Gospel of John or Matthew, which is "Take my cross and carry it, for it is light." So this is about the reality that you just described. Maybe Yarema will agree with me that if you take something objectively, the project was filmed easily, even though the trip was difficult. It was a trip on foot, and it was physically taxing, to say the least. But uh, the characters of this film, they conveyed this sense of entertainment, and the goal of this trip was its festivalness, if I can say that. It's this ease with which it was done. And I think this lightness is something that you rightfully noticed. And let me add and say that it might seem superficial, but we didn't really aim to immerse into the characters as documentary filmmakers usually do. We what we tried to immerse into was the mass consciousness and the event itself, and to dive deep into the space rather than explore the psychology of some individuals. So we try to stay away from overly sentimental or revealing or linear scenes. We were sort of floating downstream together with a stream of people. And this doesn't even seem to be a space as much as a stream going in a certain direction. I wouldn't be mistaken to say that this was the goal of the film, and I think you did achieve the goal. You immerse yourself into a certain mood. You perceived the mood, and you created an artifact that conveyed this mood. I think that is important, and that I believe is a hallmark of success. It's very heartwarming to hear these pieces of feedback, these compliments after the premiere, because that kind of a mountain drops from my shoulders, because I feel, yes, finally, what we try to convey, the lightness that we try to convey, it can actually be read by the audience. We were wondering whether we could make interesting films, but not by overly immersing into this greater truth of our characters. And before I ask the next question, which would concern your methods, it looks like you have a certain conscious, deliberate approach to what you're doing. But let me ask about this a little later. But let me just finish with my introductory word. I just want to say and air some of the things that I believe to be important. Let me just finish with this finer play, which is difficult to perceive in any other way. But I think the central image of the film, where everybody is watching, looking into that rock, I think this is a certain artwork there, because everyone is trying to see something of their own, even though this is a collective act as such. And this is an act of collective immersion, that you have to look collectively into this rock, and you get to see or not see something. And depending on what you see, it kind of describes you as an observer. So this guy in a straw hat said, looking for your own image of holiness. This sounds very trite and usual, naive, but this conveys, the film, I think, conveys the content of this phrase in a very non-trivial way. So I have just said most of what I wanted to share about the film, but let's transition to the questions now. And let us start with the very beginning. Could you tell us more about yourselves, about how your duo formed, and what are you trying to achieve by forming your duo, and what is your method in doing so? Roman, why don't you start, and then I'm just going to add to, I mean, why don't you make an introduction and I'll build on that? It's a very wide reaching question, but it could warrant a very long response. But your question probably consists of two subcomponents, which, because you mentioned the method and you mentioned the backstory of our duo. Well, uh, our duo formed very simply. We went to the same high school together. We went to the same high school in the city of Kolomia. Uh, and I believe that the creative duo that already has some kind of a practical biography has formed in around 2014, 2015, and we've been able to express ourselves in a range of genres of visual arts, in gallery work, and cinema. Yarema, maybe you have an interesting story. Let me add about the method. Well, the method has its roots in the world, because we graduated from the photography faculty of the Karpenko Kari Institute of Performing Arts, and we didn't want to be just to be cameramen. We wanted to reach wider and deeper. We went to explore different meanings and pictures, and this has eventually expanded to our practices in visual arts, uh, and finally reaching that of documentary cinema. Now, New Jerusalem, as our documentary debut, is of course somewhat focused on the visual uh, image and this endless contemplation. Back when we were interested in street photography back in 2011, 2012, all of our trips on the street looking, hunting for a good frame, a good shot. And this is sort of expressed in this film. And you understand that you have to wait for a couple of hours until a good shot surfaces itself. So finally, you start to question yourself whether something did happen in the first place, or was it something that you created artificially by waiting for such a long time? So the New Jerusalem was built largely on the desire to catch this something very ephemeral and something that is very volatile and emotional image, which could be very ambiguous. But at the same time, we would understand that subconsciously this is something that we need in order to convey something that we want. So your method is seemingly that of contemplation. However, your characters are also looking into a certain point to search for meaning. So, yes, the search for meaning. Whereas before, this would be something large and pretentious and highbrow, searching for meaning. But now, this is this cannot be said other than in an ironic manner. So, looking for meaning is something very everyday. Now everyone is looking for some kind of meaning. This is some sort of routine of contemplation, and through this contemplation, you can finally form something. So this is the phrase that we use to describe the film. So this is a this is a certain tagline of our film. So we decided to we go about it. So I believe because this is absurd. Yeah, I think this is a good thing. Yeah, we try to be a little bit ironic about this. Actually, in my introduction, I failed to mention that humor, because this film has a lot of humor, and the humor is pretty fine. It's very nobody is really trying to make each other laugh, but it does come out funny. And this is not a laugh out loud kind of humor, but this is more of moody humor. I'm just saying all of these things to uh, inspire and encourage our audience to view the film after tuning into our conversation. Well, so I realize now what your duo is about. Thank you for answering this for me. So, what is your auteur's position about making New Jerusalem? So, your auteur's position is that you are largely from that area and you can provide an insider's view. Could you repeat that, please? Do I understand this correctly that you possess an insider's perspective to what your film is about? So this was the theme of the film was not external to you. You didn't just go into an expedition to see something unknown. Well, I'm kind of answering your question instead of you. though. So what was your author's vision? What, Yarema, let me just say that the idea to make this project started with a grain of irony because of this pilgrimage. But I think we have been able to demonstrate that this irony is not critical. It's more of humanistic or humane irony. Starting from 2011, our friend, our common friend with Yarema Malashchuk, who is also from Kolomea, who ventured to Zarvanitsa since his childhood, and he kept inviting me there, and we just went there just to see what's happening there. And I think this first push towards this humane irony was given to us by our friend Pavlo, because it was through his attitude towards Zarvanisa. Uh, I told about the story to Yarema, and we decided that we can actually go film there. So I send my regards to Pavlo, who might be watching us right now. But regarding this irony, I think this irony is in lies in this constant overdoing of things. So if we think about Pavlo, who called me back then, I just remembered a story that uh, about that demonstrate this irony towards something sacred. So Pavlo called me back in 2011 before our trip. So his grandfather passed away, and I call Pavlo and I say, "Please accept my condolences." And what he replies is, "Yeah, this is something that happened. I'm in the room, and here he is. I'm not very far from him, and you know what? I'm looking at him, and I I see that he doesn't have shoes on yet, but he has black socks on. You know what I'm looking at? I'm looking at this tag on the socks. What's there? Well, it has a Tom Cruise photo on the socks label, and this irony, this overdoing is lies between the irony of Vasil Stefanik and the irony of Brumschulz. I think Western Ukraine and Galicia has uh, given birth to this irony. So we are not aiming to create some artificial irony about this event that we are portraying. But I would add that besides all of this Tom Cruise thing, there's another layer, which is that we seem to have felt at a certain point that this irony is life, that formulates this land, and it gives it the strength and this faith in the absurd creates this will to live. The religious people are trying to find meaning in life, and even though it's ironic, even though it's sometimes funny, but it's better to have this irony than to face this bland reality. I would say, to continue or to sum up, to I would sum up by saying that I would disagree that this creative faith demonstrates the entirety of this longing for life. There's a lot to criticize about this pilgrimage, and a lot of other events in human life could be criticized. Creates a will to live, but I think that this faith is creative in its nature, and that it creates itself and that supplements it complements itself, and this is something that you can definitely see in the film. I think the scene with the rock actually demonstrates that to the fullest. There is a very strong link between our friend Pavlo uh, and uh, and this rock, and there's a very serious link. I think this is somewhere that we get to argue. I mean, a will to live, maybe even if it's a superstructure. I think the superstructure is something that creates an image, even though it's a construct, even though it's a fictional image. But here we have a film, and we're talking about something that could be a construct or even a comical construct. But even besides being comical, this is something that exists, and this naive faith that we're seeing is something that I would applaud to people for. I would applaud to people that have the desire not to laugh over this. They have the strength and they have the faith to fill the emptiness inside them. Sometimes they even laugh at themselves a little bit or with themselves. I think the irony that you mean here, that it's not irony that much, because irony means a little bit of alienation and distancing, but here I can see some kind of inclusion, because you don't appear to me as religious people. See, I mean, but you're also not outside observers either. Now, if we're talking about irony, I frankly think that I don't really like this word. I think there's a bit too much of that around lately. Um, Maybe there's use in picking a better word. I would, I would add, uh, I would say that the situation in Christianity, to be more exact, or the situation with the holy site of Zarvanesia, it really very easily absorbs irony and modifies it, because the characters are on this very fine verge where you don't even have to ironize about them. They ironize about themselves. This is not even as much as about modern Christianity as about modern human beings. The people who are Christians, they would absorb irony and they would return it to you. I think the holy site of Zarvanitsa and the entire parish. And I think this film is uh, comic in its nature. I think this lightness and this self and this joking and laughing with and at oneself. There's a great scene where girls are sitting at a bus stop and eating pizza, and one of them is asking, "Have you confessed yet?" And the other one says, "Well, I haven't. Maybe as I go there, maybe I'm gonna sin there. So let me just confess my sins afterwards." Yeah, this is a very characteristic moment. We had a huge amount of footage about this pizza as it was cooked, as it was transported, there was a huge story with pizza, but we had to shorten it. So this is a part, this was a great moment. And I think for me, this was a very characteristic fragment of the film where we show the fun of this pilgrimage. So from the side, for example, from Kyiv and from Kharkiv, so I see this religiousness and as people would, but it's not this perception of as of religious fanatics. They're no, they're not. But actually, Western Ukrainians are very humane in their religion. They're not fanatical. You know, it's it's just about meeting up, having some pizza, and talking about some lightly religious things. So, this it's interesting how this religion is not as much about following a cult as some kind of a cultural issue.
And we, like cultural people, we civilized people, we have our t-shirts. So to this or that, religion is some cultural factor because it's inherent to the cultural person. Well, you see, I would say that all of the religious people, they have a very slight peculiarity. They transfer from one channel to other very easily. They can easily go from the prayer, from some mantra, they can easily go to the pocket, they take iPhone and see what time is it, how much time is left until the end of the Mass. And then they put it back to the pocket and go on praying. So this is this boldness, this easiness of transfer between the first and the other, between the high ground and the lower. So if you look at the missionary part, what it means, that Christianity is a kind of an interesting thing. It's a kind of a summing up, concluding peculiarity. Because Christianity is not living the better times now. But on the other hand, why not? Why not like this? Why don't we transfer from the higher ground to common ground? At least it's interesting to observe. Yes, sorry to interrupt you. No, it's okay. I would like only to remark that one of the special effects of this movie, that it really shows religion in a proper way, as if it's very humane. That people who don't understand religion, they are a bit scared of religious people. They think that religious people are wild or savages. But this movie shows that this is just a usual human, earthly thing, usual, common. I would think even that it's a kind of useful thing, because it totally fills up the space, it totally formats the person, because not every single person has an opportunity to be the student of the university or to have a highly developed social role, for the person to understand all the complication of the life circumstances. And religion helps in this way to format itself, to format yourself, to belong to some culture. Yes, those are rather trite or trivial words, but very often they tell about it in the context of or up till the beginning of the 20th century, the middle of the 20th century, and now sometimes it's not mentioned, but because this topic is not that mainstream now. But for instance, the modern Christians of Galicia, Halachina, the western part of Ukraine, you can see that thanks to religion, this culture. Oh, I can see that we've spoken about some of my following questions. One of my questions used to be, religion is a kind of a marker or the sign of the Western Ukraine, because the west of Ukraine is very religious. And in fact, this religion cannot be named in one word. This internal belief shows it from the internal point of view. So I would ask you, would you yourself go to this pilgrimage, not for the movie, not for the sake of the film, but for your own needs? I have already been at this pilgrimage 2 times before the film was shot, just as a pilgrimage. I do remember that. Yes, I could do that, because we would need to lower our tone and emotions and intonation. We should transfer it into... Well, in fact, this is a celebration. For lots of the people, it's just some pastime, or how they spend their time. It's not kind of a sect. It's not an event, though there are some fanatics there, of course. But it seems to me that it's important. Well, you mentioned that partially we were speaking about the cultural marker or something like that, the cultural sign. I would add to that that here we need to understand those people who don't live in Galicia, the west of Ukraine, or those who belong to some different story. You still need to understand that Greek Catholic parish, the church which organizes this pilgrimage, is the Greek Catholics. And I would say that they are now in the stage of a kind of, well, they tried to catch up what they lost since 1942 or 45, when Greek Catholic Church was banned, if I'm not mistaken, beginning with the World War II and ending with 1991. It's kind of the fallout of the Ukrainian history of this church. And now they try to catch up what they lost before. So we can look at that in a poetic way, or you can look at it as a tragedy, or you can notice in this catch-up a kind of rather interesting mental ways of this pilgrimage, of this part of the country, those mental codes which are revealed in this time jumps. Time leaps are well reflected in our film, in our movie. Maybe for lots of the people it is still not in the frame, and people don't guess about that because it's a set of gags or set of peculiarities. But behind those peculiarities of the characters, we can see this hidden tragic history of the church, which is reflected in a comic way in our film. Maybe it is bold or courageous, maybe a bit too bold, but it seems we can do that. We're already at this stage. By the way, I'd like to remark, the tragic character, well, honestly, I did not see that, and vice versa. I saw this film as a manifesto, kind of a normality, success, or just normal way of life of Greek Catholic Church, because in the frame we can see normal, good people, some adequate people. We can see that Zarvanitsa, the sacred place, is so well constructed with white stone, using, as far as I understand, Canadian money. So it's a very successful cult center, and it's totally civilized. It's okay for people. So the film shows a kind of victory, in fact. Yes, it is like that. But we need to understand that, well, I don't know, have you ever been there? But the people who've been there, you can watch it online through the pictures. So it's kind of a newly baked cake, because during the last 20 years, it has created a kind of a Disneyland of their kind. During the discovery of the New Jerusalem, which you can find in the last episode of our film. So this is what I'd like to speak about now. Yes, well, in fact, my next question. There you can see how in 20 years they caught up those lost 60 years, well, more or less. And sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's tragic, but this peculiarity is a main one of Zarvanitsa, the sacred place, that it was artificial, it was created, it was man-made. Well, maybe artificial is a bit too harsh, but still, since the beginning of the 19th century, when it was the end of the 19th century, when it was the center, And since the times when they were banned, it has always been under the status of sacred ritual. Lots of people visited this place secretly. They were caught there, but finally they were allowed to go there, and they create more and more of that. They bring more and more. And out of the architectural point of view, the perspective needs to criticize that, because there are lots of things there which are exaggerated, hyperbolization. It's a bit of too funny or just ridiculous. But we, on the other hand, we observe a kind of a very precise historic moment of this community. And I belong to it because I'm Greek Catholic myself. I was baptized in the Greek Catholic Church as well as my friend. Well, it's interesting. It's nice that you have mentioned that, because I personally did not see that. This kind of new novelty, this newly created thing, shows that everything has been created recently there. They don't have some stable stone constructions with gray stone, because there was a break and everything, they had to do that from scratch, right? Yes, and it had to become almost plastic, because there was no opportunity to make it of stone. I do apologize that I interrupt you. But finally, we have an opportunity to construct our own. We build it, and we can watch, we can go there and watch, and you can see our film, you can see how it looks like. And all of this experience, which we gained during the Polish, Austrian, Hungarian times, which the Western Ukrainians remember, some better times in comparison with the awful Soviet times, all of this experience, this elite bourgeois part, you can name it whatever, it resurrects a bit, and it looks like this delay or this layback. It happened not because of us, not because of our fault, but because of our neighbor or because of our historical circumstances. But still, it's a delay. This is how the delay looks like. Is it ridiculous? Maybe it is. Is it tragic? Tragic comedy? Maybe it is tragic comedy. It once. This is what I mean. Well, I would like to add that that's a very interesting socio-cultural peculiarity of Ukraine, that the Soviet Union put us into the front line, put us into some frontline ideas about beliefs and religion, about atheism. Since early ancient times, it has been cultivated, and the churches were just ruined, but Europe was still Catholic with churches. And since the 70s, Christianity, Catholicism in Europe has gone down, and it used to be banned here. We were banned to believe. And since, well, in an instant, it was totally distorted, because we came back to belief, to our religion, but we got used to be without God. So now we have an opportunity to believe this Western world, which we're trying to reach. And we tried to take the whole image of God, this better life. And honestly speaking, we don't have that much of belief left. So there is some weird paradox created. After 1979, if I'm not mistaken, when the Greek Catholic belief and the Church was again renovated in its rights, and the whole renovation and resurrection began, and they began to build churches again and collect money for that, people, I'd say, wanted to renovate all of that. But the world has already changed. And maybe there is a kind of interesting point there. Because of that, again and again, we can renovate those images which have been lost in the world. We can renovate again and to look and think about that image, about that belief, which was totally discredited. I don't know, in Europe, a kind of city way of life. Well, you know, out of what you just mentioned, it really explains this moment, and I wanted to ask you about that. So kitsch, the people's culture, some authentic religious feelings or religious Disneylands, but we mentioned a lot what it be for the pilgrims, this moment of kitsch. of exaggeration in this modern abroad topic. So we got used to perceive kitsch as a kind of a secondary thing, some artificial thing, a kind of pseudo-cultural. But you can take kitsch, you can perceive kitsch as a certain stage, a certain situation where you have to take this culture, to perceive it, to accept it, because this is the situation, this is how you should represent yourself through the kitsch. And then this kitsch is not that easy to say that it's secondary or pseudo-cultural. And you can also put through yourself all of those cultural points. I would add a bit to what you've said about that Galician Greek Catholic kitsch. Just recently, the day before yesterday, I had a conversation with our common friend, Yarema, who is a religion, and Anton Fomenko, who is a religion scientist, and he maybe hears us now. We spoke about Greek Catholic, about the Orthodox, and about the history of Christianity overall. And he said to me a very interesting point, that the Orthodox believe, they very often use the word when they describe the Catholics, and Greek Catholics including, they use the word a kind of, in this characteristic, is just precious, something. I did not feel this precious before, but now I feel it, and I am Greek Catholic, and I always felt it, not even love, but the desire to share this Catholic preciousness together with the Catholic representatives of the Greek Catholic Church. What does it mean, this precious? I think that in the modern Catholic world, the Catholic are always already ashamed of this preciousness. They at least try not to mention it, or at least not to show it, or to show it less and less. What does it include? It's a kind of looking at yourself and a kind of self-deepening into your own beautiful but simultaneously tragic belief. And the Orthodox say that they fight with that, but the Catholics, they decorate that. So a kind of self-admiration, narcissism, which they strengthen. So if they fight it, then they have it. Yes, but I mean that the Greek Catholic parish and the Catholics, just Catholics, any Catholics, they take this precious or this self-admiration into their everyday life. They love it. They like this representation. It's very important for them. The representation in the modern world leads to different topics and methods. It's photos and totally retaking of pictures and some new monuments which emerge in Zarvanitsa every year. We can see drones and all of those rebroadcasts. Why do they need that? Just for everyone to see it. But you can come and see it there, but they still reprint it, redigitalize that. There is nothing bad in that, but still, the Greek Catholic, they take this preciousness, all of this representation, and they just enjoy it. So far, they're in the stage when they just are narcissists. They self-admire in that. You can criticize that, but you can just shoot it to make a movie. So to praise it is not the modern way. You cannot praise it. It's a bit ridiculous, honestly speaking. It's kind of a decorative or stage thing. But Yarema and I, we chose to shoot it first. And then the spectator or anybody else can criticize that from different points of view. But still, this preciousness, this is the word. It seems to me this is the word. Well, because of that, I remembered the Photoshop moment when people are just standing and they imitate the lightning, so as if the lightning is added to the picture with people. So, you know, this was the hint that it is totally fake or artificial. It's not real. Yes, really. I do apologize. I would say that we don't have much time left, but we've got some questions which were asked by the spectators. Okay. Still, I interrupted you, please. I wanted to add that this is the different topic of the film, which is maybe not less important, or maybe even more of the most substantial, the image. Not only the religious image, but the image as it is. Image. which is going through the whole film, the cinema image, the image of a documentary film, the image as an icon, the image on the rock, the image which is constructed or not constructed image. And it's also what we pushed from, because since the ancient times, when we were just interested in theology, or some prophets, philosophers who were speaking about that, we were so admiring their self-assuredness in their belief in this image, where the primary thing is not the entrance, not the fact whether it's true or not, but in its essence, what you have, what you gained, this representation is more valuable than the original. And the same can be said about different wonders, that, in fact, the question whether Jesus Christ stepped into the water is not relevant anymore. It doesn't have any value either in theology or in criticism of Christianity. It's a kind of a different point, and people shouldn't debate about that. It's not debatable. This fact is not interesting as it is. The representation is interesting. How it came through the history, what does it mean? That's what's interesting. And it seems to me that's how we bring the statement, one of the statements for this movie, that representation is as important as the original. Yes, then what we see depends on its image, what we see here and now. If we look just into the rock, it's not an image, but we create it as an image ourselves. So if we look into the kitsch, but the image and the power is not in it, but what we can see in it. And I think that the person is capable to see an image in anything, in the rock, in the art, in anything, in kitsch. So it's a kind of messages of your movie. Okay, let us look at the questions asked to have enough time for everything. So, the questions which are written by our spectators. I would also like to remark that I was still waiting for a long time for your movie about the Galician belief, because everything we had before that, some photographers or pictures in the exhibitions about this Galician Western Ukrainian belief, what were exhibited, we have it now in Latin America. We have some plastic Holy Mother, which is exotic and interesting. But finally, this is the expression which shows some humane part, some normality in that. It's very simple. So, yes, it was not an intention, because it was the idea of 2017, and we aimed to take not just some topic, a kind of a popular topic, like which used to be very wildly disseminated in the Ukrainian cinema. We wanted to make something maybe sometimes inconvenient, because Galicia was always associated with something exotic. And we wanted to create this image and maybe to get rid of this image of exotic. Yes, Galicia is a kind of Ukrainian internal Mexico. Yes, Latin America. And you normalize this image. You show that those are just normal people, not like exotic ones. Okay, I'm reading out the questions of the spectators. So how has changed, whether it is your overview and after you watch this movie? We have only 4 minutes left, at least. Roman, will you answer? Well, in fact, maybe I could speak about the practical part, or maybe even sophistical or philosophical point of view. As the professionals, as the film directors, of course, it has changed. My mindset has changed. We made lots of conclusions with Yarema from the sophistical point of view. Well, about what? My mindset about people, or about religion, or about the situation in my country? I cannot say that mindset has cardinally changed. I don't know how it's at yours, Yarema. I'm still with my own mindset. The film is the film, and I am myself. Well, it seems to me that we had some changes. We have already exhausted and closed the topic of this I'd say, de-objectivization of Galicia. We closed this religious topic, which very often was interesting for us, and it's a nice way. Yeah, we closed it, this topic of Galicia and religion, Galicia and de-exotization, I would say. I would say for us, for ourselves, we already uttered it. We said that about that in the modern way. It doesn't mean that the topic of Galicia won't be ever present in our future works, but I would say that this religious component of Galicia, Galiciana, the western part of Ukraine, we have already mentioned about that. I don't know whether it goes on or continues in our works, but I feel that we have already mentioned that, and enough. And here we have 2 more questions, but we have only 3 minutes left. So, how was the shooting going on? Were there any complications? And how did you organize the shooting? What was your strategy? Did you try maybe not to delve into, not to deepen into some compassion to the characters? Those are the 2 questions. Well, I could answer. Let me say a couple of words. I would say that the shooting process was rather interesting, but it was rather chaotic as well, because the first our business trip, we just formed what we want to create, and it was found in the editing, because the editing was very long and hard, but at the shooting set, we knew for sure where we shouldn't go, and we were trying to be strangers, or at least not to take it, not to perceive it too much. Well, of course, we had to move some points because we wanted, because it should be according to the script, but sometimes it happened on its own, how it always happens at the shooting set. Some of the episodes were partially constructed or staged, but it's okay. In some movies, it's totally okay. Roman, maybe you could add? Yes, to add, well, the only thing I'd say is we were really afraid to get too close to this palette of those characters, and this fear was the obstacle which was very difficult to overcome in the editing, because when you create this cyclical film, a kind of a carousel movie, a merry-go-round movie where some characters are repeating from time to time and no one cried in the end, then you think, if you don't have some protagonist, who is the character, the main character of the movie? What is the movie about? And very often it mixed us up. It in fact deepened our fear, but closer to the end of the editing process, when we had some ambition of our editing, we understood that since the very beginning, the film turned out to be how it was during the shooting, a kind of a free one. And if now I try to remember, to recall some episodes, like anyone, random ones, I can just remember a man who is speaking out closer to his stove, and he is a kind of boasting. We never see him again, but still it was very important for us to show this man who describes how he constructed it, where he brought those bricks from, and in fact it's a kind of a torture on the spectator, because spectator would like to know the further fate of this character. Has he ever been in Zarbanitsia? What did he do after that? But still, we don't answer those questions. And our aim was to show this collective representation, collective kind of, some collective, I would say, irony maybe, and sometimes a kind of life, everyday, kind-hearted happiness. which was possible to show only with the help of this kaleidoscope of these characters, which sometimes even can be controversial for cinema as a genre. Sorry to interrupt you because we have last seconds left. If you may, just 20 seconds in a nutshell, people are asking what was the response of the characters of the films when they saw the movie, if they saw it. Oh, this is the first night for everyone. So we are waiting only for positive response. We are hoping to have some positive response. So you see, we were speaking about religion, kitsch, religion in the culture, but people were interested, our spectators were interested during this meeting, some precise, interesting stories which took place just beyond the frame, just not during the shootings. Yes, it was interesting for me as well, but I was trying to make the conversation too serious. Yes, we deepened into religion too much. No, it seems to me it's worth speaking about it, because it's really rather serious issues and points which you highlighted in the movie. It's really cool. Yes, it speaks about the serious character of our intentions. It's a kind of research of ours. Yes, unfortunately, I don't have the time to ask you about your further plans. Just in short, would you tell the name of the movie which you are shooting now? Would you repeat? I didn't hear your words. Just very short. Try to be short, telling us about the name and the topic of the movie you're shooting now. Oh, Yarema is working. Yarema can answer. Oh, this is the project without a title. We are in the process of collecting footage. It will be connected with the cities, with the lockdown, the quarantine, the time we are living now. It's a kind of some points which I don't know so far. Hello, guys. We don't hear them anymore. Does it have to be like that? Could you say goodbye now then? Okay, thank you for your attention, all of those who heard us. If there are any questions, write to our direct messages. Now it's totally possible. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andriy. Thank you, Yarema. Thank you. Thank you for the movie and for the conversation. Thank you. It was really pleasant. See you. Bye.